Ben's signal.
Hello, everybody. Before we get started, thank you all for coming out here. We're going to get started in just a minute. I want to make sure that you know that the bar is open. I love that. The bar is open. Nice. Also, if you're interested in sharing on social media or anything like that, there is Wi-Fi here, and so it is free, and you can go to UICC guest, and the password is Irish with a capital I 2700. Irish 2700. All right, hello, and welcome to the San Francisco Independent Media Coalition 2026 Congressional Candidate Forum. My name is Ben Trefny. I'm executive producer at KALW Public Media, serving the Bay Area. Thank you. Thank you. And I will be moderating this evening's conversation. Tonight, we're so pleased to welcome candidates Shoykat Chakrabarti, San Francisco Supervisor Connie Chan, and State Senator Scott Wiener to this venue, the United Irish Cultural Center. The SF Independent Media Coalition is an alliance of local, neighborhood, and community publications that represent the grassroots voices of San Francisco, some of whom have been around for half a century or more. Others are more newcomers who represent the rise of hyperlocal digital media and its many constituents. But all are completely independent and based in the city, dedicated to keeping local news alive. Tonight, we will be briefly introducing them as we ask their questions, which directly affect readers from all backgrounds and areas. Please visit sfindependentmedia.org. That's sfindependentmedia.org for more information. Here's how tonight's event is going to go. Each candidate will have 1 minute to introduce themselves before the questions begin. After each question, each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer. They will see a note when there are 15 seconds to go, and will hear a chime when their time is up. I may need to jump in if they go over, so sorry if I need to interrupt, but we're trying to keep this fair. If I determine that an answer necessitates a direct response from one of the other candidates, they will have up to 60 seconds to respond. We'll be cycling through the candidates in alphabetical order to answer each question. At the end of the question period, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement in reverse alphabetical order. We will aim to finish this evening's conversation at 8:45. We thank you all in the audience for attending tonight, and ask that you respectfully allow the candidates to speak unimpeded. Also, please do not hold up any signs during the event. This is a forum exclusively focused on the candidates and the questions from the San Francisco Independent Media Coalition. We'd like to thank our generous sponsors for tonight, AAMG Estrana Health and MG Stonework Company, and our community affiliates, American Community Media, Common Cause, Good Neighbor Lab, Indivisible, and San Francisco State Journalism Department. So, it's time to begin your self-introductions. Mr. Chakrabarti, you have 1 minute.
All right, thank you so much for having us.
Okay, immediately, please do not interrupt the candidates. We'll start your time again, Mr. Chakrabarti, and please let them speak unimpeded.
So the wrongfully based right now are monumental. I mean, authoritarianism, potential World War III, there's a cost of living crisis that's still crushing San Franciscans. And politics as usual is not going to solve this. We have to change the system. And I'm running because right now that's possible. There are people running across the country going up against the establishment because this is the culmination of a movement that started with Bernie in 2016, where I served as a director of organizing technology. I started just as Democrats to primary corporate Democrats at a time that nobody else would, and we got the squad elected. I ran AOC's first campaign, and as her chief of staff in Congress, I led the creation of the Green New Deal, which led to the largest investment in climate in history. So I can tell you, DC is not like Sacramento, where Democrats run everything. I'm the only one here who's turned big ideas into results in Washington. To do it, we have to take on not just Republicans, but corporate money, and we have to change Democratic Party leadership. I'm the only one here willing to do that.
Thank you. And Supervisor Chan.
Thank you. Just last week, as your Budget Committee Chair, we held a budget hearing demanding answer from Blue Shield when they denied cancer treatments to our retired firefighters and retirees. We demand answers to make sure that we have care for those who have contributed to our city. And that is the fight that we have to continue, not only in San Francisco, but all the way to Washington, D.C. I have fight this fight with you together. We make sure that when Trump cut our health care, we put $400 million on reserve to safeguard that cut. When Trump cut our education, we make sure that in San Francisco, we still work and do everything we can to have affordable childcare, fully funded K-12 classroom, and free city college. And when Trump cuts our food security, we make sure that we support our community. And this is why we are the only candidate endorsed by teachers, nurses, and firefighters. And with that, together with the working people, we're gonna fight this fight, and we're gonna win. And also thanks to the bartender.
All right, thank you. And Senator Wiener.
In the next member of Congress, San Franciscans want someone with the right values, with a backbone of steel, and with the ability to get things done, and someone who will challenge the status quo and break glass, because the status quo is broken. I have done that my entire time in office, and I am the only candidate who has not just talked about challenging the establishment, but has actually gotten it done, beating some of the most powerful forces around. I helped build and lead a movement to completely change how we approach housing in San Francisco and California, and we broke glass to do that. I have challenged some of the most powerful corporations in the history of the world. We've gone up against the big tech companies and beaten them on AI safety. I've challenged the health insurance corporations and forced them to cover more mental health. And when establishment Democrats have said, back away from trans people, I have said, hell no, we're going to continue to protect marginalized communities. I will take that tenacity and that fight and that willingness to break glass to Congress.
Thank you all very much. All right, our first question from the San Francisco Independent Media Coalition is from San Francisco Bayview. The Bayview is San Francisco's Black newspaper, covering Bayview, Hunters Point, and Black communities since 1976. This forum is built around questions from community journalists. What makes community journalism important, and will there be a commitment to regular, on-the-record engagement with neighborhood and ethnic media, including SF Bayview, and responding seriously when those outlets raise documented concerns that larger media ignore? We'll begin with you, Supervisor Chan.
Absolutely, thank you to San Francisco Bayview. That as a legislative aide to former Supervisor Sophie Maxwell, who actually really represented Bayview, this valley. We saw what happened with marine power plants and Bayview Hunters Point, all these really impacting the Black and Brown community living in District 10. And that as an aide, with her leadership, under her leadership, we shut down the power plants. But we know that we couldn't have done it if it weren't for a publication and neighborhood publication like Bayview, and making sure that we keep elected and community leaders accountable to deliver clean up at the Navy sites, as well as to make sure that we can shut down that power plants. But even after we shut it down, we need to have investments in transit, housing, and jobs. All those things is because thanks to the local journalism and continuing reporting, so that we can hold people accountable, including federal government.
Thank you. So to you now, Senator Wiener, what makes community journalism important, And will you respond seriously when those outlets raise documented concerns that larger media ignore?
Community media is unbelievably important, particularly in an era of massive consolidation of media. And we've seen how that's played out with Trump, with ABC and CBS, and all of these conglomerates that are bending the knee and basically becoming state media. And local and independent community neighborhood newspapers play an essential role, and we have to support them. We have done that in the legislature through funding. We have to continue to do that. I will always have an open door, as I have for my entire time in office. I put op-eds in our local papers, return calls. We will always be available. And in the Bayview in particular, this is a part of our city that has been neglected for far too long by our city government, disinvestment, contamination, the lack of a grocery store. I've taken the tea all the way to the end many times, and it is shocking how long that takes. There are real issues that have not been adequately addressed, and local neighborhood-based media is an essential form of accountability.
Thank you. And Mr. Chakrabarty, what makes community journalism important, and will you respond seriously when those outlets raise documented concerns that larger media ignore?
Community journalism is a vital part of how anybody gets informed of issues, because the community journalists are the ones who are on the ground actually seeing these issues. That's where breaking news breaks. And especially in a community like Bayview that's so often overlooked, community journalism is vital. So yes, I will absolutely be open and have on the record conversations with community journalists, as I have throughout this entire campaign. And in our campaign, we have made extreme efforts to make sure we're in the Bayview. We've done multiple town halls there. We have a massive outreach program in Bayview. I was just at Gumbo Social yesterday doing a neighborhood meet and greet there. Because in Bayview, we know that there are these issues around environmental justice and toxic waste that have been ignored for a long time. Early on, it was folks from Bayview who were telling me about the current issue around toxic waste and nuclear waste in Hunters Point Shipyard, where they're trying to develop housing on a nuclear waste site. They're trying to do demolition in a place where there's actual toxic nuclear waste, and we can't allow that. That's federal land, and in Congress, I will make sure that we don't do any sort of development in Hunters Point until we clean up the nuclear waste there. Also, when I worked in Congress previously, one of the major things I was proud that we got through from the Green New Deal into the Inflation Reduction Act was this idea of environmental justice, of places that have been redlined or that have been left behind, getting funds first. And because of those efforts, Bayview directly benefited. We had hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants that came into Bayview for clean air and clean water monitoring systems. So as a member of Congress, I will continue to hold regular town halls. I'll continue to talk to all community media, and I want to make sure that community media is fully funded, because it is an essential part of how anyone knows anything about the city.
All right, thank you very much. As we get rolling here, I want to give one note that the mics are live, so please make sure to give space for the other candidates to speak. I think that it's pretty easy to make noises. The next question is from KELW Public Media, where I work. KELW broadcasts news, information, music, and culture at 91.7 FM, online and in an app, and hosts more than 100 live events every year in downtown San Francisco. As you've talked with constituents over the past 6 months, what are the top 1 or 2 issues that you've heard about, and how do you plan to address those concerns? We'll begin with you, Senator Wiener.
I think it's about democracy and the rise of authoritarianism and how we protect our democracy and then the cost of living, and that people are feeling crushed. And the two go hand in hand, because when people lose faith in the ability of government to make their lives better, and when people feel like government has failed and their lives are getting worse and their kids' lives are going to be worse because we failed as a country, not just California, on housing, and people can't afford housing, because our healthcare system is fragmented and broken and people fall through the cracks, and medical bankruptcies are through the roof, and people have to decide, do I take my kid with asthma to the hospital and go into bankruptcy or risk my kid's life? When people can't afford transportation, then sometimes when they conclude that government has failed, they take risks and vote for authoritarians like Donald Trump. Grifters that come in and say, I'm going to solve everything, even though they're going to make things worse. And so people want us To protect democracy, we need a new Voting Rights Act to get rid of all the obstructions and make voting easier. National independent redistricting. We need to abolish ICE, move it back, those functions back to DOJ and make DOJ more independent of the president, so the Attorney General is not the personal attorney of the president. We need a national civil rights law for LGBTQ people, which we still don't have. And we need a national housing policy and to get the federal government back into housing to do a generational investment in mixed income social housing so that people are able to afford housing. And we need to move towards Medicare for all, away from this fragmented, chaotic system that people fall through the cracks to a unified system. And until we get there, we need to do the work that I've done in the legislature to hold insurance companies accountable to actually cover things like mental health and other key needs that people have in terms of healthcare. So that's what we need, and that's what I'm hearing from people.
Thank you. Mr. Chakrabarty, as you've talked with constituents, what are the top 1 or 2 issues you've heard about, and how do you plan to address those concerns?
Yeah, so the number one issue that I hear about is this threat of authoritarianism, this authoritarian coup that we're seeing right now under Donald Trump. And in 2026, people want to hear, how will we get anything done there? How will the Democrats actually fight back against this? Because Trump will still be president, so we're not going to be able to pass a whole lot of this legislation with Trump as president. And right now, people are fed up with a Democratic Party that is not fighting. So in Congress, number one, I'm going to build the best constituent services office that we have in the nation. This is something I did under AOC in 2018 when Trump was president then. And a lot of people don't realize that your member of Congress is your main point of contact to the federal government. So if you're under attack, you have a spouse put into detention, or you don't get a social security check, you come to us, we fight for you, and it really works. I saw that when I built AOC's Constituent Services Office, when she was in the most immigrant-heavy district in the country at a time when Trump's doing an all-out war on immigrants. But beyond that, we need to organize civil society, because civil society is the final bulwark against fascism. So right now, you see Trump going after media companies, or law firms, or universities, one at a time. And individually, they cave. But if they were to organize into collective blocks, they would have real power. And in Congress, I will actually play the role of not just a legislator, but an organizer to make sure we fight back against fascism. And finally, we gotta make sure that whenever Democrats do have these points of leverage, we're actually fighting and we're not caving. This is something that people have been frustrated over and over again, where the Democrats have caved on things like funding ICE, on ACA subsidies and Medicaid cuts happening. And in Congress, I'm gonna go in and organize a caucus of us who will hold our vote to make sure the Democrats fight when we have leverage. The second biggest thing that people wanna hear about is the cost of living crisis. And on that, we have to have universal health care, universal child care, public power, tuition-free public colleges and trade schools. And to do any of that, it's really gonna be about building the movement and changing the Democratic Party. So we go in 2028 with that as a centerpiece.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Supervisor Chan, as you've spoken with constituents, what are the top 1 or 2 issues you've heard about, and how do you plan to address those concerns?
Well, this is why I love San Franciscans. We talk about everything from Great Highway to foreign policy. That's why I hear everywhere. But truly what I hear about is healthcare. The cost of healthcare is burdensome and it's difficult. It's difficult for families to have to choose grocery and medication. And absolutely, we're going to reverse those Trump cuts to healthcare. We want to push for Medicare for all. And I also hear people really worry about the immigration policy, seeing that Trump administration killing Americans on our streets, and we want to fight for birthright citizenship, naturalized citizenship. We want to invest pathway to citizenship. And I also hear that people are really worried, and especially for small business, how tariffs have really caused such a difficulty for them to do business all around town and in San Francisco. And this is why we in Congress will rein in Donald Trump to make sure that his illegal tariff and that will be stopped, and that he will be held accountable, and to make sure that tariff is strategic and truly in the best interest of Americans. And those are the issues that we really hear every day. And of course, there's so much in such a wide range, and it's the reason why San Franciscans are really diverse. But I think that fundamentally we share this one fundamental concern, is that how can we stay in San Francisco and be able to afford the city that we love? And I would say that this is why we're going to fight to make sure that the working people solution is healthcare, education, immigration policy, and of course tariffs. There's so much more that is around transit and housing. We're going to deliver it all, but we're not going to do this alone. We're going to make sure that we really have the feedback from San Franciscans and create a working people's agenda. And that's what we're going to do in Washington, D.C.
All right, thank you very much. Here's a question from The Frisk. The Frisk is an online publication that covers San Francisco's major civic issues and works for a more accountable, inclusive, and affordable city. Please describe one federal funding initiative you will pursue that can specifically help San Francisco, and tell us how you plan to pursue that. We'll begin with you, Mr. Chakrabarty.
At the center of my housing plan is the plan to create a new federal financing entity that can directly finance and even build affordable housing. Now, to back up, I just want to say, the status quo in housing has been completely broken, right? When I first moved out to San Francisco in 2009, my first apartment there was $500 a month. And that same place is $1,500 a month today. The status quo has failed us, and what we're doing at a local level is simply not working. So we have to have federal solutions. So my plan calls for bringing back this federal financing entity that existed before, called the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. We used this during the New Deal and the World War II era. It would have the power to provide low-cost construction loans to affordable housing, and if private markets won't build housing, it would have the power to spin off public developers to directly build it. It would even have the power to stockpile things like lumber and steel to control inflation costs in our housing construction industry. And of course, to do any of this, we also have to repeal the Faircloth Amendment. This is something that currently prevents us from building new social housing. When I was in Congress, I worked on the Green New Deal for public housing, which would have done exactly that. Now, the problem with doing any sort of social housing initiative in Congress is the barriers are not just legislative or plans. Right now, we have private interests that are profiting off of the broken status quo, and they have way too much influence, and even the current Democratic Party. So if we want to pass real structural changes to get the cost of living and cost of housing down, we have to break the corporate stranglehold on the Democratic Party. We have to change Democratic Party leadership. And we have to change what's politically possible in DC. That is something I have experience doing. We did it on climate, where we managed to get Democrats from wanting to take no action on climate change to eventually passing the largest investment in climate in history. And that is what I'm going to do on housing, to make it politically possible for us to pass these big ideas to finally get the cost of housing down.
Thank you. And then Supervisor Chen. Supervisor Chen, please describe one federal funding initiative you'll pursue that can specifically help San Francisco and how you plan to pursue it.
There are a lot of things that I can think about right now. I know that Mr. Chakrabarty already talked about housing, but I want to talk about the investments for San Franciscans, that specifically to protect our waterfront. There is about $13 billion that is in the congressional funding waiting for us to be able to push forward. It's from the Water Resource Development Act. $13 billion to be able to help us invest in our waterfront to protect especially Ferry Building and then Embarcadero. And that is the things that we want to continue to do. We know that even on the west side, we face, again, a lot of infrastructure challenges. And so with that, it's a very similar approach that we already have that $13 billion secure for the waterfront on the east side. We want to continue to protect San Francisco to make sure that we can also invest on the west side as well, is what we have to continue to think about. San Francisco infrastructure has been very critical, but also old, and that San Franciscans alone cannot bear that burden to invest in our infrastructure. We see that in our stormwater treatment. We see that that's how our utility bills continue to go up. We do not even own our utilities grid. We want to purchase that from PG&E, but 5 years ago it was $2 billion, and we know that this could be so much more, and even for a long-term strategy to maintain it. Again, so to make sure not just our waterfront infrastructure, we also want to invest in our power grid, in our municipal power, our public power. This also actually requires us to go and get federal funding and federal program and tweak the federal regulations so that we can truly have power and in our own hand, in our own jurisdiction in San Francisco. And all of those really for the long run is how I see the federal government should play a role supporting San Francisco.
Thank you. And Senator Arena, the same question to you. What is one federal funding initiative you'll pursue that can specifically help San Francisco?
Well, housing is critical, and in my time in the legislature, we have completely changed how we do housing and also invested dramatically in affordable housing, and that has resulted in, because of legislative work that I've done and funding we've provided.
Excuse me, please don't
And we've nearly 5,000 affordable homes have been built just in San Francisco, many more statewide. And so as part of my housing plan, we want to make a generational investment of $1.2 trillion over 10 years, paid for by reversing the bulk of the George W. Bush and Trump tax cuts for rich people and corporations, to build mixed income social housing, and also to pay cities $10,000 per home that actually gets built, so cities are also getting that funding. But the housing, of course, to be successful, has to be complemented by other things. We need more public transportation, and we need, and it is a priority for me, to increase federal investment, not just in capital, so we can get the train to downtown San Francisco and have more and better transit lines in San Francisco, but also to support operations. We've done a lot of work to prevent Muni and BART from collapsing, and that's important. We need the federal government to be involved. And then the families who are living in those homes and taking that public transportation or otherwise getting around the city needs access to childcare. And it is outrageous that there are people who have to pay 30 or 40% of their paycheck for childcare. We need a federal program, universal access to low-cost childcare, so that families do not have to decide, do I work or do I take care of my kid? People should be able to do both.
Thank you. You three are doing a great job of staying on time. Thank you very much. All right, our next question comes from Indivisible. Indivisible is a progressive civic organization supporting informed democratic participation in San Francisco, and it acts as an affiliate supporter of the San Francisco Independent Media Coalition. First question for you, Supervisor Chan. How will you try to ensure the Democratic Party represents constituents and not just big donors?
Making sure that we elect Democrats who will not be taking corporate PAC and PACs from oil companies, fossil fuel, pharmaceutical companies, and guns. And that is first step. And then to also make sure that we elect people who are not going to be bankrolled by billionaires, or that they make money from private equity funds, and that truly harms our community. We make sure that we elect people are for the working people, to make sure that they're not just say and to talk, but they do not have a record to show for. This is the reason why we are the only candidate endorsed by Working Families Party, endorsed by many, many working people in San Francisco. And because we say that we understand what it means to be a working mom, first-generation immigrants, and what it means that we have to pay our bills, and we cannot manage, even though we do our best, and one job should be enough, and yet we still cannot get by. We want to stay in the city that we love, so let's actually fight for Medicare for all. Let's fight for better education. Let's make sure that we remain the sanctuary city that we are, because all these things make San Francisco the great city that it is, and we will continue to invest in it. And most importantly, in my opinion, to be able to afford all those things for all of us in San Francisco, in California, and in the United States, is that we have to have a progressive taxation. Enough is enough for the working people to pay more than the billionaires. It is time for the billionaires to pay their fair share. No billionaires should be paying less taxes than our teachers, nurses, and firefighters. It is time to make sure we push for a progressive taxation, not to just wait for the federal level, but we do it right now, this June, and not only in San Francisco and in California, but in every state in the United States.
Thank you. Senator Wiener, how will you try to ensure the Democratic Party represents constituents and not just big donors?
Well, first of all, we need some significant ethics reform, and that means banning stock trading by members of Congress. It means we have to overturn Citizens United, which is just it's part of the rot that has come down on this democracy. and that includes both sort of corporate and wealthy people just flooding elections with races, or self-funding and flooding elections with cash. And we also need to elect people who are willing to tell their supporters, no, I disagree with you. And that's not just donors. There are all sorts of ways that when you come into office, that you have to be able to say no and have disagreements. And I've done that, and I've sometimes paid a hefty price politically or otherwise for doing it. I have people who used to support me financially who no longer do because of laws that I've passed to regulate particular industries. And you have to be willing to do that. And we need people in office who are willing to say, I'm here to serve the people, and I'm not going to just do whatever any supporter, financial or otherwise, wants me to do. You have to be able to disagree. We also need public financing of elections. That is so essential. We have that in San Francisco for the Board of Supervisors and the mayor. Supervisor Chan and I both went through that system, running for the Board of Supervisors. It's a good system, and we should replicate that federally and at the state level. The voters banned it in California. We have to get the voters to unban it, and we need it at the federal level too. Public financing is a huge antidote to some of these issues.
Thank you. And Mr. Chakrabarty, how will you try to ensure the Democratic Party represents constituents and not just big donors?
Well, the first step is to not take corporate money in your own campaign, which I don't do, but some opponents might do. But look, I'm running because we are living in a massive change moment. This is our New Deal moment, right? There is a real chance that we can come out of this whole mess with a completely different economic and political system. And at the center of that has to be Medicare for all, universal child care, tuition-free public colleges and trade schools. It has to be ending political corruption by banning congressional stock trading, banning the revolving door between Congress and the lobbying industry, and getting big money out of politics for real, moving to a fully publicly financed election system. It also has to mean tackling the wealth and income inequality in our society. That means wealth tax on billionaires and centimillionaires. It means a real Green New Deal. And it means a completely different foreign policy, where we're not spending billions on endless wars and dropping bombs when we don't invest right here at home. That is possible, but it's not possible with the current Democratic Party. I've seen in DC how members of Congress spend hours a day calling big donors for money. They say yes to whatever leadership wants them to do just to rise up the ranks, and that's why nothing changes. What I will do to change the party is primary other corporate Democrats who are there. I will vote to change Democratic Party leadership. And the reason I'm saying I will do these things is I'm not interested in working my way up the ranks and 30 or 40 years later getting to be chair of some committee. That's how the system currently works, and that's why nothing changes. I'm interested in taking this moment of possibility that exists right now, this huge moment of change, and turning that into real solutions, because everything anyone's saying up here, it's only going to happen if we're willing to challenge not just Republicans, but also Democratic power. And I'm the only one in this race willing to do that.
Thank you. The next is a two-part question from The Wind newspaper. The Wind is an English and Chinese bilingual news publication based in San Francisco, covering the Asian and Chinese communities since 2020. Do you support the proposed California Billionaire Tax Act targeted for the November 2026 ballot, which would impose a one-time 5% tax on individuals with over $1 billion in assets? And do you support San Francisco's Prop D in the upcoming June election to collect a top executive pay tax from large companies when their top executives earn more than 100 times the median pay of their employees? Senator Wiener, you're first.
Thank you. As I have stated before, I do not support Prop D. I have been an advocate to raise the state corporate tax and to reverse the Trump corporate tax cut. I think that's important. But downtown San Francisco has not even come close to recovering. Union Square has not come close to recovering. And in my view, now is not the time to do a major business tax increase just in San Francisco. So that is my position on the billionaire tax. I have supported wealth taxes and income taxes on high earners the ballot measure just a few years ago. That measure has not qualified for the ballot yet. I don't know if it will. I do have concerns about a one-time tax with a cliff at the end of it. We need stable tax revenue over time. It should be progressive taxation. It can be a wealth tax. It can be an increase in income taxes on high earners. And those are things that I support. A one-time tax with a cliff at the end is not stable taxation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chakrabarty, do you support the proposed California Billionaire Tax Act, which would impose a one-time 5% tax on individuals with over $1 billion in assets? And do you support San Francisco's Prop D to collect a top executive pay tax from large companies when the top executives earn more than 100 times the median pay of their employees?
Yes, I strongly support both of those. And look, Trump just gave a massive tax cut to the billionaires that would be expected by this wealth tax. He also gave a massive tax cut to the corporations that would be affected by the Overpaid CEO Act. The least we can do is try to claw back some of that money to fund the essential public services that we have in San Francisco and in California. But this is, of course, a problem that predates Trump, because inequality in this country has been rampant for a long time. And for me, this is personal. When I first was in San Francisco, I worked in the tech industry for a little bit. And because I ended up working at the right company at the right time, I ended up making a lot of money. And that was a profoundly eye-opening experience, because I don't come from money. I grew up middle class, going to Texas public schools, and my parents grew up poor in India. They were refugees during partition. And yeah, I worked hard, but I didn't work harder than a teacher or a nurse or the janitors cleaning our offices that did every day. I just want to start a lottery. And it shouldn't be the case that you have to win a lottery just to be able to afford a home or secure retirement. But that's the economy we have today, and we have to fix it. And the only way to do it is to rectify this tax system. We've transferred $79 trillion from working people to the richest over the last several decades. We have to claw that back. And that's why I have been calling for a wealth tax on billionaires and centimillionaires since the start of this campaign. This is going to be the foundational fight in 2026 and 2028. Are we going to continue the wealth consolidation, the power consolidation into the hands of the few, or are we going to take our economy back and rectify it and make an economy that works for working people?
Thank you. And Supervisor Chan, do you support the proposed California Billionaire Tax Act and San Francisco's Prop D in June, which would collect a top executive pay tax?
Yes and yes. And I will tell you this, that people say it's not the right time or they will leave. Let me tell you what happened as your budget committee chair in 2022, that the controller projected the overpaid, we have overpaid CO tax then, and that the controller projected the overpaid CO tax revenue will be roughly about 60 million. And then at the end of that fiscal year, what we know that to be true was that we ended up as a city and county in San Francisco collected $206 million from that tax revenue. And that was during, as you may recall, San Franciscans, that was some of the toughest time for all of us. Our restaurants couldn't open, our salon couldn't open, people have to wear masks and 6 feet apart. Those were the toughest time. People were losing jobs and on unemployment. And yet, the overpaid CEO tax, projected at $60 million, generated San Franciscans $206 million. And that is going to happen again for us when we make sure that the billionaires and their companies pay their fair share. Look, Trump already gave away billions of dollars of tax breaks to these billionaires. Not only that, now he's putting $1.5 trillion into the defense funds, and that is $1 billion every day in Iran war. We cannot accept that. We must fight that. And that has to start with San Francisco. And because I truly am, as a San Franciscan and proud one, to say that so goes San Francisco, so goes the nation. We're going to bring this to Trump and to his face and say it is time to make sure that your cronies, billionaires, are going to pay their fair share, and we're not going to let up until that is done. All right.
Thank you. All right. Here's one from Broke-Ass Stewart. Broke-Ass Stewart is an alternative culture and lifestyle site celebrating San Francisco's creative, budget-conscious spirit. Your predecessor, if you get this role, Nancy Pelosi, famously made a fortune trading stocks while in Congress. where do you stand on proposed legislation such as the Restore Trust in Congress Act, H.R. 5106, or the Stop Insider Trading Act, H.R. 7008, which would ban or further regulate lawmakers, their spouses, and dependents from trading individual stocks? Mr. Chakrabarty.
I'm strongly for banning congressional stock trading. This is something we pushed for in 2019, but Democratic leadership at the time did not allow a vote on the bill. This is an issue that has strong bipartisan support. If you look at it, 90% of Democrats and 90% of Republicans want to ban members of Congress from trading stocks. But we don't get a vote on the bill. And the reason for that is because leadership doesn't want to do it. They want to cover for their members because there are a lot of members of Congress who are getting rich off of this. I don't think leadership realizes what a nefarious effect that has, because it's because people see members of Congress getting rich off their stocks while they're there that people have lost all faith in Congress. It's what allows someone like Donald Trump to come in saying, I'm going to drain the swamp, because he's not entirely wrong that the swamp is a bit corrupt. So we have to do this. And what I will do in Congress when I go into 2026 is I will file a discharge petition to force a vote on it. This is a mechanism that that Ro Khanna and Tom Massey used recently to force a vote on releasing the Epstein files. It traditionally gets used on issues like banning congressional stock trading, where there's broad bipartisan consensus at the people level. It got used on McCain-Feingold campaign finance reform. It got used to get the Civil Rights Act out of committee back in the 60s. And the thing is, most people aren't willing to do it because it upsets Democratic leadership, or it upsets your party leadership, because going around them and force a vote on an issue. Well, I don't care about that. We have to do it. I'm going to force a vote on this issue and make sure it gets passed. This is something we can get done in 2026 because it's a popular issue.
Thank you. Supervisor Chan, where do you stand on proposed legislation such as the Restore Trust in Congress Act or the Stop Insider Trading Act?
I absolutely support banning stock trading for Congress members and their spouses as well as their kids. But we got to go a step further than just banning stock trading. In San Francisco, we have done a lot of work with clean government, making sure that there's transparency in our election and in our campaign poll. We need to do the same thing in federal level to make sure that, first of all, we need to know who's lobbying our Congress member. There is actually a law and a log people track to say who's lobbying our elected official as well as our city department heads. We know that because of that law, and because of that records, that our SFO director was lobbied by Waymo more than 400 times last year. We now get to ask those questions. What were those conversations like? Similarly, that's what we need to do in a congressional level, that we need to make sure we know who's lobbying our congressional member and how is that associated with the way they vote. We also want to make sure that we can know who is donating to these super PAC. We want, in San Francisco, when you donate to these PAC, your name will be listed if you're donating more than $10,000. We want to know who's donating and to these different super PACs so that we don't have dark money buying our election in a congressional level. We want to limit campaign contribution. We want to limit the contribution of those super PAC as well. This is a way, and San Francisco been doing it. San Franciscans, you've been doing it. You limit your $500 of campaign contribution so that billionaires can only contribute $500 just as you do. And when you actually contribute to a PAC, you know who they are. You know what happened when they donated to Close Gray Highway. You know who they are because they are all listed. And the same way that we must demand that in Congress to make sure that we know who's influencing our lawmakers and that we can call them out.
Thank you. And we are on the west side there, and we will have a question about the Gray Highway shortly. But Senator Wiener, where do you stand on proposed legislation such as the Restore Trust in Congress Act or the Stop Insider Trading Act?
Where I fully supported the stock trading by members of Congress should have been banned a long time ago. It absolutely undermines just confidence in Congress, and it should have happened a long time ago, and I fully support it. I will also say I don't trade stocks, and and we will work hard to get it passed, even if it's not passed yet. I will abide by it as if it had been passed, but I don't stock, so it's not going to be that hard for me to do that. I also, think that it is it goes beyond stock trading. One of the most common questions we talked before about what am I asked about on issues. That was one of the questions. One of the things that people ask me about, like, are you going to get rich when you go to Congress? Everyone in Congress is rich. And look at Congress in both houses, the average income is profoundly higher than Americans. And it's not just that the salary of Congress, which is higher than the average. It goes well beyond that. There are so many wealthy people in Congress, and that detaches Congress from the day-to-day experiences of real people. It's not just about stock trading. It's about, we need to have people, not just rich people in Congress, but people in Congress who know what it means to pay bills, who know what it means to be like, okay, am I going to be able to pay my bills this month? How am I for my paycheck to be able to do it? We need people who understand what it means to just be a middle class or working class person and not to be living in the lap of luxury. And so there's a lot we need to restore confidence in Congress, and banning stock trading is definitely one of them.
Thank you. Our next question is from Gazetteer SF. Gazetteer SF publishes original local news written by humans, and it delivers it directly to subscribers via email and text, bypassing algorithms. We've talked a little bit about housing, and this is about that. Mayor Lurie's family zoning or upzoning plan for San Francisco falls short of state-mandated housing goals for the city by 2031, according to the city controller. What are your thoughts on how to address this shortfall? Supervisor Chan.
I voted against Mayor Lurie's family zoning plan really because the fact that it does not have any protection for our small business, it doesn't have protection for our tenants. It really creates a risk, a huge risk for San Francisco, particularly for us, for the West Side, frankly, that we fall into the risk of real estate speculation. But in the federal level, what we actually have to do is make sure that we have federal investment to build housing that people can afford, to create and provide rental subsidies. This is the reason why I will be in support of Senator Adam Schiff, who also has endorsed our campaign, his BOOM Act. And the BOOM Act is to provide all those things, the rental subsidies, making sure that we have federal grants to build housing, and to increase not just for low-income housing, but to also make sure that we build middle-income housing. It is what San Francisco needs at this moment, as we know that in San Francisco, if you even earn a six-digit, $100,000 annual income as an individual, that today is still considered as low income. That is insane. We know that we need to make sure that both low income and middle income, who are our teachers, nurses, firefighters, and hotel workers, our bartenders, can actually stay here in San Francisco and be able to afford it. And that is what federal government's role should be doing.
Thank you. Senator Winter, Mayor Lurie's family zoning plan for San Francisco falls short of state-mandated housing goals. What are your thoughts on how to address that?
Sure. I support the mayor's family zoning plan, and San Francisco has to comply with the law and build the housing that we so desperately need. I agree that we need...
Please. Sorry, go ahead.
I agree that we need massive federal investment because we want people to be able to have homes. But in order for that investment in housing to mean anything, you have to have somewhere to actually build the housing. Otherwise, it's just theoretical. And that's the work that we've done to say that all cities need to be part of the solution, to build housing, to zone for housing, to have a real permitting process so it doesn't take 5 or 10 years for a project to get beaten into the ground and destroyed. And this is not just about housing, it's about real, live human beings who are being pushed out of this city and other cities. Working class people, middle income people, young people who do not see a future for themselves and who know that if they lose the housing that they have now, they may have to leave their community entirely. People who are forced into 2-hour commutes, which is horrible on many levels, including around climate change. People, we are fueling sprawl as developers build further and further and further out because they won't have to fight to be able to build the housing. We are absolutely harming ourselves when we don't have enough housing for people who need it. That's the work we've done to try to make it easier and faster to build homes. It's the work that the mayor has done with the family zoning plan, but putting federal money in and then saying, well, we're not going to zone for the housing and we're going to make it hard for you to build it, that's called self-sabotage. We need housing.
Thank you. And Mr. Chakrabarty, how do you address the shortfall in state mandated housing goals in San Francisco?
Yeah, if you look at where the shortfall is, a lot of it is the affordable housing mandates that we have from the state. And right now, we have about 70,000 units that have been permitted, already entitled to be built in San Francisco, that are simply not getting built because the financing is not there, because the cost of construction has gotten too high. So I talked earlier about how we need a permanent federal financing agency. This is a whole organ of our government that we're missing. If you look at other countries where they build out social housing, where they have affordable housing, they have a massive government-driven social housing program. We simply are missing that. We also have to have real subsidies to prevent displacement. So that means doubling rental vouchers. It means federal support for tenants unions to make sure that as we're doing this housing development, we're not displacing our neighbors. And we also have to ban corporations like private equity and hedge funds from buying up tons of housing stock and driving costs up. Now, it's one thing to say we'll do all this. The question really is, how are we going to do all this? Because there are powerful interests that are in power in Congress to make sure nothing happens. I have met so many very experienced state legislators in DC. I met this guy from Tennessee who had managed to pass a bill as a Democrat in Tennessee to create free community college there. Really hard thing to do in a Republican government in Tennessee. But what had he gotten done in DC? Nothing. He had been waiting there, sitting, waiting to work his way up the ranks to eventually have some power on some committee someday. The only way we're going to get these structural changes done is in this moment where there is this appetite for change. We have to be willing to not just challenge Republicans, but also challenge the corporate Democrats who are standing in the way. So we go into 2028 with a big vision on housing to make sure this housing gets built. We have to change Democratic Party leadership. And that is what I will do in 2026. I'm going to go in there, I'm going to build the movement to make sure that we don't just have plans, but we have the political movement to get this done by 2028.
Thank you. We now have a question from the San Francisco Public Press. The San Francisco Public Press is a nonprofit investigative newsroom producing deep dive reporting on housing, government, and public safety. Senator Wiener, the first one will be for you. State and federal regulation of artificial intelligence is important to our readers and listeners. What is your policy proposal for federal regulation of AI, independent of what the AI companies themselves are proposing?
Yeah, this is incredibly important. AI, I'm proud that San Francisco is the beating heart of AI innovation. And AI has the potential to make life better in many, many ways, whether it's curing diseases, helping us solve climate change, helping us produce more food so that we can deal with food insecurity. There are a lot of potential benefits, but it is powerful technology and there are risks, and we have to get ahead of those risks and not do what this country has often done, which is to ignore the risks. There's no federal data privacy law in 2026. There's no federal social media law, and we can't let that happen with AI. I have done this work in the legislature. It took me 2 years and a governor veto in between, but we got past AI safety legislation to address catastrophic risk. It was the leading law in the country. New York just replicated it. We need to take that work national. We need a federal law to deal with all sorts of deep fakes, to deal with misinformation, and of course to deal with workforce impacts. We should not just sit by as people we see massive job losses. We have to get ahead of that and make sure that we are understanding the risks and not just waiting for the bad things to happen. And so that's work that we have done in the California legislature. We have a coalition of state legislators around the country who work together, and there are more and more members of Congress who are willing to challenge the big tech companies, as I have done, and not just accept what they say, and to get these regulations in place to make sure that AI is serving humanity and not vice versa.
Thank you. Mr. Chakrabarty, same question to you. What is your policy proposal for federal regulation of AI?
So the regulations we're seeing right now are way too small for what we're facing. I mean, the regulation we have in California, it proposes $1 million fines per violation. That's what these AI companies are spending every 20 minutes. That's peanuts to them. This is not a question of regulation, but about control. Because with AI, we're seeing a technology that threatens to wipe out half of all of our jobs, threatening to wipe out humanity itself. And we're saying that a handful of CEOs should be able to make that decision for all of society? Why? That makes no sense. We have to control this technology so that it works for humanity instead of racing to replace it. That means that labor should have a say in how AI is introduced into a workforce. If there's all these productivity gains from AI, that should mean shorter work weeks and higher wages for workers, not workers getting replaced. It should mean that we actually take control of these data centers and treat them like public utilities. I believe data centers will be to the 21st century what electricity was to the 20th century. And the way we get there is at some point, this investment bubble around AI might burst, and these companies are going to come to the government asking for a bailout. In that case, we shouldn't bail them out, but buy them out for pennies on the dollar, turn them into mission-driven, not-for-profit corporations, and then use AI to do the good stuff like curing cancer and not the bad stuff like profit-driven slot fees. Now, the reason you don't see that many Democrats talking about this is right now AI lobbyists are spending tens of millions of dollars to buy elections all across the country. Any campaign consultant will tell you you're crazy to talk about AI because if you do it, you might irk the ire of Anthropic or OpenAI and they'll come in and spend millions of dollars in your race. Well, I've been talking about this since day one in my campaign, and just today it was announced that, yeah, the AI lobby is going to come after me in this race too. So if you want AI that's going to fight for people and not just to further consolidate wealth and power into the hands of a few, that is what I'm fighting for. And it's going to be a fight, I can tell you that.
Thank you. And Supervisor Chan, what is your policy proposal for federal regulation of AI?
There are two principles to regulate AI. One is safety, to making sure that this technology is actually safe for all of us, for all consumer. And the second principle should be that it does not take away jobs from workers. It's simple as that. And then from that on, based on these two principles, that we create a federal framework to allow, again, the similar approach that I will always have is to make sure that the federal government creates a framework to allow local control and local input. And similarly, we create a federal framework to regulate things like, telehealth or AI in our healthcare system, or AI in ChatGPT in our education system, or AI that is impacting our entertainment industries, impacting our performers and artists. These should be regulation that is very specific to the industry where the federal government provides a framework. All of us San Franciscans, we know what happened last December when we have a PG&E blackout and that Waymo just stopped working and blocking our streets and our firefighters couldn't get through, our emergency vehicle couldn't get through. That is not safe. And so that got to be halted. And very similarly, this is the reason why I support Senator Bernie Sanders and also Congresswoman AOC. They're actually legislate to moratorium to say no more data center, and I support that because no more data center until we regulate AI because they don't get to experiment on our streets and on our earth at the expense of our environment until we regulate AI, and that's where my approach be in Congress, and should there be any related AI legislation come before me, the demands will always be, what is it that, again, safety and also does that take away jobs from workers, but also how does it impact our community, particularly things like data center. We demand not only solution, but also impact and benefits to our communities.
Thank you. Thank you all. Let's go to what was asked by Jade, the Jewish News of Northern California. It is a nonprofit news outlet with a mission to inform and connect the diverse Jewish community. First, some background information before the question. There have been tentative changes to the federal government's nonprofit security grant program run out of the Department of Homeland Security. These have put many progressive institutions that rely on the grant for security infrastructure in a difficult spot. In August, several progressive Jewish groups and congregations announced they will not apply to the program after they discovered new conditions for accepting grants might require recipients to cooperate with immigration officials. Now, a two-part question. If elected, would you make removing those tentative conditions and increasing the size of this grant a priority? And if so, how would you leverage your position in the House of Representatives to ensure more institutions have access to this program? Mr. Chakrabarty.
Yes, I don't believe that we should require nonprofits to cooperate with ICE. And my position since 2017 has been that, in fact, we should abolish ICE, because ICE right now is not an immigration enforcement agency. It is Trump's personal paramilitary force. It has a budget that's the same size as the military of Canada. And we saw this coming for a long time. And we've got to also make sure that at the same time that we hold these ICE agents accountable. They're doing thousands of constitutional violations every year. So in Congress, I'm going to make sure that we remove federal immunity from ICE agents. And we should be messaging about that now so ICE agents know it right now. But in Congress, how I'm going to use my position to ensure that more nonprofits have access to that is I will use my power of congressional oversight to hold the administration accountable. We had a similar situation where when I was there in 2019, the administration was trying to add a citizenship question to the census. And this constantly happens with the Trump administration. They're sleeping in all these rules here and there. And they're relying on the Democratic Party to just ignore it and let it go by. Well, we brought Wilbur Ross, who was the Secretary of Commerce at that point, in front of an oversight and held his feet to the fire, got news around the fact that this citizenship question is about to be added, and that laid the framework for the DOJ and for a real lawsuit to happen. And eventually they backed off, and they caved on that. So when it comes to the administrative rules that are slipping in, you absolutely can use the power of congressional oversight to make it very uncomfortable for them, so it's not worth the fight. So they back off.
Thank you. Supervisor Chan, if elected, would you make removing those tentative conditions and increasing the size of the grant a priority? And if so, how would you leverage your position in the House of Reps to ensure more institutions have access to this program?
Not only that I would support the removal of these conditions, there's actually additional conditions that the Trump administration has put forward for Californians especially, and definitely for San Francisco. That is including DEI conditions. They remove a lot of grants, and not saying that we do not qualify because of that. They withhold funding for health care when any institution providing gender-affirming care and reproductive care. These are the conditions that the Trump administration actually has put on many entities and local jurisdiction as a restriction and condition for them in order for us to receive the federal grant of any kind. And absolutely will fight against any of these restricting conditions so that we could have equitable health care. We can make sure that we remain a sanctuary city, that we provide all the necessary services for the people that deserves in California, in San Francisco, frankly across the nation. I just want to express my gratitude. It's been really the lawyers in court that actually been fighting these. I would say I would love to see Congress actually do more and enact laws, but I was spending time with Asian Law Caucus and just hearing stories after stories from every lawyer that's been fighting for all of us and our rights and removing and fighting against these conditions so that we can receive funds and care. And that is not enough, what I heard, because how hard they've been fighting in court. Thanks to our Attorney General Rob Bonta, our Senior Attorney David Chu, they all have filed different kinds of lawsuits, so much more than they did in 2020 when Trump first won, or 2016 when Trump won. And so I know that this is a moment that Congress needs to stand up, have the power of oversight, and also exercise its power for appropriation bills. It is time for us to conclude those appropriation bills to remove these conditions. It is a job of Congress, and we must do it now.
Thank you. And Senator Wiener, if elected, would you make removing the tentative conditions and increasing the size of the nonprofit security grant program a priority? And if so, how would you leverage your position in the House of Representatives?
Yeah, those conditions are an abomination to a very important program, and expanding the nonprofit security grant program at the federal level will be a high priority for me. It is actually way too small. I helped create California's nonprofit security grant program. We created it and then we have grown it over time. And when you compare California to the federal government, it's embarrassing for the federal government how small it is. But stepping back about why this is important, it is a sign, a very sad sign of our times, that community institutions are being targeted. And the reason that I was involved in creating the nonprofit security grant program and growing it is that it was the top budget priority every year for our legislative Jewish caucus. Because if you've been to certain synagogues recently, you have to go through sometimes a metal detector to get in. There are mosques that are targeted, LGBT nonprofits that are targeted, Latino organizations that are targeted, and it is tragic that we need the government to step in to help community organizations protect themselves with physical or other kinds of security. But that is where we are, and it is essential that that program be strong and very well funded. Every year, my office, we reach out to community institutions to make sure people know that the grant period is opening. You can apply for it. I will do that in Congress as well. And we need that to be a strong program and not burdened by horrific conditions like the ones that Trump is putting on them.
Thank you. All right, here is a question from Mission Local. Mission Local, I'm speaking around here, is a nonprofit news publication currently covering San Francisco's Mission neighborhood with in-depth local reporting and investigations, and they are expanding. So the question is, one of you will be San Francisco's next congressional representative, most likely. Where is congressional Democratic leadership failing now, and what would you do differently? Supervisor Chan, questions to you first.
Thank you. I would say that it seems we are not using every tools in our toolbox for the Democratic Party and the Democrats in Congress. I think that slowly but surely they're picking it up, that the pace of to try to figure out, is it a hearing, is it discharge motion, is it figure out pro forma session, all kinds of different tools that we're now waking up to say we need to actually do everything. We can't just pick one strategy. All of us have to do all of it. And I also think that what is happening is that even among the Democratic Party, for some time now, is to say that there is the squad and to exclude certain Democrats. And we should recognize that every Democrat, different spectrums of politics, progressive, and however in every state, we together collectively is a strategy. We should allow all spectrum, and that there should be no judgment how people using different strategy to get things done. I appreciate my colleagues on the board, especially my progressive colleagues on the board, who actually have very different strategy, be it the former Supervisor Dean Preston and now Supervisor Sherman Walton, and Supervisor Cheyenne Chen. We all have different approach and different ideas, and the way that we create leverage to negotiate and deliver for San Franciscans is the way that I believe that Democratic Party today should be doing. That to be able to accept each other, to say, East Coast and West Coast just have different strategy and different approach, but we're all going to come together when we're in Washington, D.C., and recognizing that we need to utilize all these different tools and everybody in different committee. I reject the idea that you can only be a committee chair to be actually functioning or effective. You can be everywhere in any committee, be effective, as long as you show up and be a voice and be a vote. And I believe that should be every Democrat, their attitude in approaching and delivering for the people.
Thank you. Senator Winter, where is congressional Democratic leadership failing now, and what would you do differently?
Well, Democrats right now, and this is true when we take back the House in November, hopefully the Senate, need to exercise every ounce of leverage and power that we have. Every single ounce. There should be none left because we use it all. And so when Senate Democrats on several occasions ended up providing the votes to get to 60 votes on various reopening the government, etc. kinds of votes, that was not okay. And that must not happen. Democrats need to use the leverage we have. It is not as much leverage as I would like, but we have leverage and we need to use it. In addition, going back longer than just the last year or so, for years and years and years, although Democrats have done some very, very good things, like expanded child tax credit, which immediately lifted millions of children out of poverty before it went away, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, there have been good things that have happened. Democrats in Congress need to do so much more on housing, and I want to commend Elizabeth Warren, who's partnering with Tim Scott in a bipartisan way to advance strong housing legislation. We need more of that. We need to be moving aggressively towards Medicare for all, and until we get there, doing things like replicate the law that I passed in California to force insurance companies to cover way more mental health and addiction treatment. We need national paid family leave. It is absolutely unacceptable that in 2026 we still do not have that in this country, and that people have to make horrific choices around their family as a result, and a national low-cost childcare program. These are all just nuts and bolts ways of tangibly, immediately drive better and more affordable, and they have to be a high priority for Democrats.
Thank you. Mr. Chakrabarty, where is congressional Democratic leadership failing now, and what would you do differently?
Congressional Democratic leadership is completely failing to fight. And I'll give you one example. So a few months ago, we saw Alex Preddy get murdered in Minneapolis. And in that moment, the entire country was watching. People were so upset with us. And that would have been the moment for Democratic leadership to say, we're not going to pass any budget until we claw back the $75 billion that we gave to ICE. Instead, what they did is they passed a 2-week resolution to fund DHS, and then they did hold the line, but it was on things like body cameras, which won't make a difference. But by the time 2 weeks had passed, national attention had moved on. Democratic leadership doesn't know how to use national attention to win these fights inside the House. That's how you win a budget negotiation shutdown. That's how you win a debt ceiling fight. I'll give you another example where Democratic leadership's failing. A few months ago, we had a defense budget that passed. That was a $900 billion defense budget at the time that Trump was threatening to go to war in Venezuela. That was a $900 billion defense budget that passed with 115 Democrats voting for it. At a time that only 3% of Democrats and only 16% of Republicans want a bigger defense budget. So I would have said we should have Democratic leadership that holds a line on things like the defense budget in this moment. I would have said that we should have forced a vote on Ro Khanna and Tom Massey's war powers resolution before we went into war in Iraq. But Democratic leadership allowed that to just happen without a vote. So they're not fighting, and they don't have a vision for what comes next. They haven't presented an alternative to Trump. It's not enough to say we're not the party of Trump. We have to have a vision for what we're going to do. And yes, that does include things like Medicare for all. But I can tell you, with the current Democratic Party, we are not going to get Medicare for all passed, even if we win the White House and Congress. It's not just about electing Democrats, it's what kinds of Democrats do we elect? We have a Democratic Party that holds the health insurance lobbies, the pharmaceutical lobbies. We have to break the stranglehold of corporate money in our party if we want to create a future for everybody.
Thank you. We'll turn now to the Bay Area Reporter. Bay Area Reporter is the nation's oldest continuously published LGBTQ+ newspaper and has served the Bay Area since 1971. HIV rates continue to tick up, even in cities like San Francisco. Last year, the Food and Drug Administration approved twice yearly Yeztugo for PrEP. This could be a breakthrough in HIV prevention, but the cost is estimated at $28,000 a year, putting it out of reach for many. How would you work with federal agencies and drug manufacturers to get the cost significantly reduced, particularly in this time of Trump administration cuts to HIV prevention? Senator Wiener.
This is very personal for me. I came of age as a gay man when I was a teenager, a closeted teenager in 1987, when there was literally a mass die-off of gay men, not only gay men, but primarily gay men, a mass die-off with a federal government that did not give a damn, and that frankly, at times, seemed like it was cheerleading for us to die faster. And there was no treatment for this disease. And that's how I entered my community as a gay man. And when I came out in 1990, my first engagement in the community was volunteering on an AIDS crisis hotline in 1990, no treatment, in Durham, North Carolina, when I was in college. And I took the calls from people who just found out that they had become positive, or from parents of a child who had become positive. And the people sobbing. And we as a community were on the brink. And this community rallied, particularly in San Francisco, but nationally and around the world. And we saved this community. And because of life-saving drugs, HIV converted from a death sentence for many to a manageable long-term chronic illness. And we have to continue to work to collapse infection rates. I have worked in San Francisco to put together plans over time to reduce infection rates and to make sure everyone has access. And PrEP is essential. I was the first elected official in the country to announce in 2014 that I'd take PrEP. We need to expand access. Insurance companies must be required to cover it. And we need Medicare and all government programs to be able to negotiate with pharmaceutical manufacturers to get that cost down. No one should be denied access to any form of PrEP, period, end of story.
Thank you. Mr. Chakrabarty, how would you work with federal agencies and drug manufacturers to get the cost of Yeztugo for PrEP significantly reduced, particularly in this time of cuts to HIV prevention at the federal level?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I do want to say thank you for that story. That's very touching. And, you know, when we were in Congress, we saw the same issue with oral PrEP. At that time, Gilead had the monopoly on oral PrEP. And it was, you know, a drug that could prevent HIV/AIDS, but because of the monopoly, it was out of reach for too many people. And at that time, there was a massive movement to try to create generic PrEP. And so we worked with that movement. And part of what we did to be a part of that movement was we held a congressional oversight hearing, brought the CEO of Gilead in front of Congress, and made the case that oral PrEP should actually be owned by the public because it's created through public research. So the people should have the patents for this. Now that pressure is part of what forced Gilead to eventually create generic PrEP years before their patents expired. We have to do the same thing on injectable PrEP today because this is a drug that could completely eliminate HIV and AIDS, but it costs close to $30,000 a year. It's out of reach for the vast majority of people. So in Congress, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring the CEO of Gilead back in front of Congress to an oversight hearing, and I'm going to make the case for why we should have generic injectable PrEP. But then we have to go beyond that to actually having the government directly manufacture these generics because we can't. That's how we make this drug and all drugs permanently affordable. Now, that's something that the pharmaceutical lobby absolutely hates because the pharmaceutical companies, they love producing these drugs and then collecting rent off of them for years. So the idea of a generic drug manufacturer at the federal government is something they will fight tooth and nail against. And the way they fight is by pouring in millions of dollars in campaign contributions to members of Congress to be able to buy their vote. That's why I don't take any pharma lobby money, so I'm going to be free to fight them in Congress.
Thank you. And Supervisor Chen, how would you work with federal agencies and drug manufacturers to get this cost significantly reduced, particularly in a time of cuts to HIV prevention?
First, to reverse Trump's cuts for our National Health Institute, to make sure that we can continue not only reverse those cuts, we expand and continue the investment for the National Health Institute on this research. It's important not to just settle with what we have today and right now with the HIV, like PrEP drugs. We can do more and we can do better, and we need to continue to advance. And second, we got to make sure that Ryan White Act, that in federal government as a federal grant, not only that we continue to make sure that it has its funding, that we can actually add more funding into it, not only because we know that the cost of doing business for Ryan White's grant has increased significantly, particularly in California and in Bay Area. We need to make sure that it's actually funded fully so that treatments can be provided to everyone that needs it. Ryan White Act has changed the Trump administration has changed its funding formula to only allow people to be funded where they reside, which we know that it's very limited access for a lot of people who are outside the San Francisco Bay Area to be able to receive the treatments. So we absolutely need to reverse that Trump funding formula and continue to fund Ryan White's Act. I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, it is Medicare for all to make sure that for right now, if we, as we continue to build that towards Medicare for all, today, what we can do is to affirm Medicare coverage to include the PrEP and everything, all the treatments that is necessary for HIV and AIDS patients. We need to affirm and allow Medicare to directly negotiate with pharmaceutical companies to lower drug prices. And of course, we've got to continue to expand that care and making sure that it's not just the care, but also location of care. Because truly, San Francisco is great. We have that access, but I think that it needs to be everywhere, even outside the Bay Area.
Thank you. The next question is from El Tecolote. El Tecolote is a bilingual newspaper serving San Francisco's Latino community since 1970. Senator Alex Padilla has announced his push for renewing immigration provisions of the Immigration Act of 1929. This would update the existing registry statute of the Immigration and Nationality Act in several ways. It would adjust the registry date to meet current circumstances so that an immigrant may qualify to apply for lawful permanent resident status if they've lived in the U.S. continuously for at least 7 years before filing an application, they do not have a criminal record, and they meet all other current eligibility requirements to receive a green card. Would you commit to supporting this effort and making it a top campaign objective, and why? Mr. Chakrabarty.
Yes, I would support that, and I've actually been calling for the years to be reduced to a 5-year time period that you've been in the country before you can apply. And look, I believe that we have to completely change the conversation on immigration. I mean, when my parents came to this country back in the 1970s, my dad got here with literally $8 in his pocket. The way he got here was back then, we were a country that had just had decades of wages going up. We had just put a man on the moon. We had built the interstate highway system. We were such an optimistic nation that we were begging immigrants to come. And that's how my dad got here. We had these immigration offices all over the world that were recruiting people. A friend of my dad's took him to one of these offices in Calcutta where the staffer pitched him on the American dream, if you can believe that, right? Got him to apply for a visa right there on the spot. And then a couple years later, he got it. It was so much easier to come to this country. And that is how we need to be treating immigration today. We need to welcome immigrants in this country. And that means supporting legislation like Senator Padilla's. It means creating a clear pathway to citizenship as well for any undocumented immigrants who have been here, who satisfy those same criteria. And ultimately, it's going to mean creating an economy that's optimistic again. You know, there's a reason why we were able to have that sort of welcoming mentality. It was also because during that time, people's lives were getting better. We were optimistic about the future of our country. And that's ultimately what these next 2 and 4 years are going to be about. It's not enough just to defeat Trump. Or when we take power back, are we going to create a country where everybody's lives are getting better, where we go back to welcoming immigrants? And that is also how we expand social justice, how we include people. We have to have a positive vision of a growing economy that is inclusive of all to defeat MAGA. We can't compromise with them. We have to have a new vision and win on that.
Thank you. Supervisor Chan, would you commit to supporting Senator Alex Padilla's announced push for renewing immigration provisions of the Immigration Act of 1929 and make it a top campaign objective, and why?
Yes, recently Bay Area Council, a business-focused organization, had a report about more than 2 million immigrants are living in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area, and out of which about 500,000 are undocumented immigrants. But collectively, if we know that Trump administration deport that 500,000 undocumented immigrants, what it means for the Bay Area is that we will lose $67 billion of GDP. We will lose $8.4 billion of tax revenue. And that is how immigrants been contributing to San Francisco Bay Area and to the state of California to make it the fourth largest economy in the world, and that is immigrant. And we got to support the immigrant community. We see what they have done, we have done and contributed. Me as a first generation immigrant, born in Hong Kong, came to San Francisco's Chinatown with my single mom and a younger brother. I am so grateful to be in San Francisco and to see how immigrants together collectively have built San Francisco. And we, not only that I support Senator Padilla's legislation and committed to pledge as a campaign pledge, but also a commitment to see it through. We got to see that just last week, that Asian Law, ACLU was in Supreme Court arguing for birthright citizenship. We have to affirm birthright citizenship. We have to affirm naturalized citizenship, because just about 3 months ago, Trump is going after those even with naturalized citizenship. We know it to be true that there are 15% population across the nation that actually are undocumented, but they can become citizens, but they just don't have the legal means to do so. This is why San Francisco is great. We actually invest in legal defense funds. We need to do that in federal level to make sure that we have pathway to citizenship.
Thank you. And Senator Wiener, would you commit to supporting Senator Padilla's effort and making it a top campaign objective, and why?
Yes, and it's critically important. We need to be very clear that immigrants make our country better and stronger, and always have. And what's happening in this country right now in terms of the complete demonization of immigrants and the terror campaign being inflicted on immigrant communities around this country, it is un-American, it has to stop, and there has to be strong accountability for these extreme constitutional violations that they're inflicting on immigrants. Immigrants are part of the fabric of this country. When my family came here, Jews from Eastern Europe and Russia fleeing the pogroms where the villages were being burned down, they were being killed, and they fled and they came here like so many Jews did. And they arrived where there were problems. It wasn't perfect, but they were able to come here, make lives here, and here we are. And when I look at, for example, folks who are coming from Central America, fleeing violence, fleeing just sometimes unraveling governments, and going through that incredibly dangerous journey through Mexico to get here, risking themselves and their families, they are doing it because they want better lives for themselves and their families. And these are people who are people we should want in our communities, because they're going to make our communities better, and they do make our communities better. And so it breaks my heart to see the terror that's being inflicted. So we need a pathway to citizenship. The Padilla bill is great. There are others too, and DACA is part of that. It's just horrific that there's still no pathway for the DACA recipients, but it needs to go way beyond DACA. We need to have a path to citizenship. It's not good enough to say, do it the legal way. There is no legal way. We need to create a legal way.
Thank you. We have 2 questions left before the final statements from the candidates. This is the San Francisco Independent Media Congressional Candidate Forum, and we are talking with candidates Shoykat Chakrabarty, San Francisco Supervisor Connie Chan, and State Senator Scott Wiener. This question is more regional, and it is from the Richmond Review and Sunset Beacon. These are neighborhood newspapers providing local news and community coverage for more than 3 decades. A key issue here on San Francisco's west side is the ultimate use of the Upper Great Highway. The roadway was closed to traffic during the pandemic, alternated in use for cars on weekdays and pedestrians on weekends as a compromise soon thereafter, and then closed to automobile traffic after a citywide vote. Do you support keeping the roadway closed to cars every day, as it is now? Support the compromise, open to cars during the week, then closed to allow recreation on the weekends? Or support allowing cars on the road every day, as it used to be? Supervisor Chan, how do you feel about that?
I have a lot of feelings about that. But look, I think that for the West Side residents, actually San Franciscans know where I stand. I am always about a compromise. Mayor Art Adams has taught me this and mentored me this, and say when it's civil rights, you go for the book, and you have your backbone, you don't back down and you fight till the end for civil rights. But when it comes to everything else, learn to find a way that actually deliver for the working people and find a solution and find a compromise. And that is really how I see Great Highway. Great Highway shouldn't be a divisive issue for the West Side and for the city, only if elected leaders actually have the backbone to come up with a solution and work hard to make sure that we solve the problem first before we just went to the ballot and just close it out, like just close it. Because it's ignoring the West Side and the needs of those that need to go to school, drive their kids to school and go to work and so much more. And without addressing traffic, without addressing lights, there's so much that we could have done and should have done before we do that. And that a compromise is good because it could have been a just transition through that process. If the ultimate vision is to say we need to be a greener future, better environment, and get people out of the car and not drive, then invest in public transit. That is a direct solution to that problem. Closing a road does not give us that solution. What it does is it ends up dividing our communities. It is our job as elected to problem solve and provide a solution, and it is not our job to actually divide the communities. And then here we are, we end in a space that go round and around instead of having a government that actually listens to the people and deliver the solution that actually works both for the West Side and the East Side.
Thank you. Senator Medina, do you support keeping the Upper Great Highway closed to cars every day, supporting the compromise, or supporting allowing cars back on the road every day?
I support the continued existence of Sunset Dunes, which is now the third most popular park in the city of San Francisco. And in terms of listening to voters, we of course should, and the voters spoke and passed Prop K. And I supported Prop K. I know a lot of people, including on the West Side, who did not. And I've had many, many conversations, and I very much respect people's opposition to it. But ultimately, that is what I believe, and it's been a successful park, and I don't want to take that away. And I will also say that this is not the first time that we've gone through issues like this. When I first moved to San Francisco, it was shortly after the complete meltdown fight about the Embarcadero freeway, whether to rebuild it or remove it. We chose to remove it, and thank God we now have the waterfront back. Right after I got here, there were multiple ballot measures about whether to tear down the damaged Central Freeway in my neighborhood or rebuild it. Thank God we took it down because now we have Octavia Boulevard and Hayes Valley is just blossoming. The voters spoke on car-free JFK, which is wildly popular, although that was also controversial. So I respect people's views on this, but where I come down is this is a successful park. I want to keep it successful. So many people love it, and so I support keeping the park intact.
Thank you. And Mr. Chakrabarty, what is your stance on the Upper Great Highway, aka Sunset Dunes?
So, look, I voted for Prop K. I supported the Sunset Dunes Park. However, I live in DuBose Triangle. I don't live on the west side. And so, of course, I enjoy the park, but I totally see how it's caused real inconvenience for folks on the west side. I don't think this should have been a ballot proposition that was handed down and forced onto the residents of the west side. And something I'm doing in my campaign is I'm going all over the city to talk to folks about exactly these issues. We've done town halls in the Richmond, we've done town halls in the Sunset, and I want to hear about the actual issues from voters today, because this is not how we build parks elsewhere in the city. Why should this have been something where everyone else forced this park onto you? So I'm listening, I'm learning, and I will go with where both the community actually wants this to go.
Thank you. All right, before the final comments, we have one final question, and this comes from multiple outlets. And this is, what sorts of unique challenges and opportunities do you see filling a seat that such a prominent congressperson, Nancy Pelosi, held? We will start with you, Senator Weiner.
Can you just repeat that question?
What sorts of unique challenges and opportunities do you see filling a seat that Nancy Pelosi held?
There are challenges and opportunities. Nancy Pelosi is an absolute icon who moved mountains for our country and for San Franciscans. And I think a lot of times, unless you're really paying close attention, it's hard to even come up with the whole list. I've asked for the list, actually, of everything she delivered for San Francisco. I've never quite seen it. I know it's very extensive, whether it's making sure that saving Obamacare and making sure that it actually exists, whether it is massive climate action, in so many ways that she has delivered for San Francisco. The Presidio would not exist without her, Chrissy Field, et cetera. Those are big heels to fill, and there will never be another Nancy Pelosi. But in following Nancy Pelosi's, following her in Congress, I will chart my own path, as I have always done. When I got to City Hall, I had never been working at the Board of Supervisors before. I had never set foot in the state capitol when I started running for the state Senate. And each time I learned the institution, and I quickly succeeded and was able to enact very, very big legislation to make people's lives better around housing, around healthcare, around so many of these issues. And so I have been able to move mountains in the legislature. And I know there was a comment before about how state legislators can't succeed in Congress. That's false. Actually knowing how to legislate, it is actually a skill to be able to build diverse coalitions that you need to pass anything. You can't just come in and by fiat say, this is what we're doing. You have to know how to work with people, build coalitions to move mountains. I have done that, and I will do that in Congress.
Thank you. Mr. Chakrabarti, what sorts of unique challenges and opportunities do you see filling the seat that has been held by Nancy Pelosi?
Former Speaker Pelosi, especially when she first got elected to the seat, really changed the politics around a whole host of issues, especially the HIV/AIDS epidemic that was going on at the time, where the country wasn't taking it seriously. But she went there and she fought, and she pushed the bounds of what was possible and used that to get money back into this district to really affect what was going on, the total crisis that was happening in San Francisco. And that's following in the legacy of what this city has always been. I mean, this is a city that unionized the West through a strike that the Longshoremen did it back in 1934. This is a city that was the home of the anti-war protests, the gay rights movement, the disability rights movement. And I believe that right now, we are facing a dire break in our country. Things can't get much worse. And the role of San Francisco in this moment is to fight to fix what the country is getting wrong, to push the bounds of what's possible again. That is what I will go to do and what I hope to succeed in doing. It's not enough to go to DC and just join the system there and try to work our way up the ranks. It's not enough to go there and try to build some coalitions. We have to have a new vision of what this society is, and to do that, we have to take the popular outrage that exists in this moment, which is bigger than anything I've seen, and turn that into political power, and then use that political power to deliver for people. This is the kind of situation that someone like FDR jumped into after the Great Depression. Back then, we had a strong far-right movement that was filling the Madison Square Garden with these huge Nazi rallies. But he didn't pitch going back what we had before the Great Depression. He pitched the New Deal, and with the new movement that came in with it, completely transformed society, proved that democracy can work to make your lives better, and that's what killed that far-right movement back then for decades. That's what we have to do today. Thank you.
And Supervisor Chan, what sorts of unique challenges and opportunities do you see filling the seat that has been held by Speaker Pelosi?
Well, the challenge is I am not Nancy Pelosi, but the opportunity is that we will have Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Madam Nancy Pelosi, as our predecessor. That's the opportunity, that we get to build on the legacy of seeing that Presidio remain to be a legacy open space for all San Franciscans. We fight to make sure that we have affordable health care, but continue to be Medicare for all. We build on that legacy. We can see that the investments that she has brought to us, infrastructure investments, be it our transit system like T3rd or Caltrain electrification, as well as we see that the $13 billion that I mentioned earlier to protect our waterfronts, time and again, because we do not see, but we enjoy all the work that she has brought to San Francisco and all the benefits that we as San Franciscan has really uniquely enjoyed. And that is the opportunity that I see, that we already have so much, that we know so much as a local government. You will see that all city departments know when to apply for federal grants, know how to fight for these federal grants, and retain these federal grants even in the face of Trump. That you see that our city attorney knows how to affirm our sanctuary city status, because all these opportunities that Speaker Madam Nancy Pelosi has given us, that we can go further. That is the opportunity that I see and I'm excited about, that what we're going to do next is the firm belief continuously to be so goes San Francisco, so goes the nation. And I am ready to throw a punch for the children.
Thank you. So we've reached the end of the time we have for questions, but we've reserved 2 minutes for each candidate to make a closing statement. We're going to go in reverse alphabetical order this time, which means we'll begin with Senator Wiener. Please share your final thoughts for 2 minutes.
Finally, reverse alphabetical order. The story of my life, I'm always at the end. So first of all, thank you for having us tonight. When I think about who San Francisco typically sends to represent it in Congress, in the state legislature, in so many positions, this is a city that has an international platform. This is the only city on the planet that I'm aware of where the closure of one store, Nordstrom, made international headlines for weeks. That is not normal. San Francisco occupies a unique place, and people look to us, they love to hate us, they root for us to fail, and even when we temporarily fail, we come back because we're the best city on the planet. And this is a city that sends representatives who know how to get it done, and who have the backbone and the skills to be able to build the coalitions that you need to get things done. Congress is a rough place. There is no, even under the best of circumstances. And if you don't have the skills to be able to actually build coalitions and the backbone to take on the most powerful interests against change, you're gonna fail. And when you look at the kinds of people San Francisco has sent, like Nancy Pelosi, like Dianne Feinstein, like Jackie Spear, like Phil Burton before, these are people who knew how to put it together and get it done. San Francisco doesn't send people who talk, it sends people who get it done. And that is what I have always done. And I have done it even when I have to buck my own party and maybe even really push my colleagues on housing, on transit funding, on so many different issues that I have just never given up until we got it done. And as you break that glass, you have to work with people. And if you come in and you alienate everyone, you're not going to get anything done, and San Francisco will be the worst for it. I would be honored to have your support for Congress.
Thank you, Senator Wiener. Now, Supervisor Chan, would you please take 2 minutes to share your closing thoughts for the evening?
Well, this is an unprecedented time, San Franciscans, in the face of Trump and the horror that we face every day, his attacks on working people. So the question is, now that Speaker Madam Nancy Pelosi decided not to run for re-election, who will be our voice? Who are we gonna send? Are we gonna send a corporate Democrats that is bankrolled by billionaires? Or are we going to send a tech millionaire that can self-fund the campaign without accountability to anyone? Or are we going to send someone who actually has built a coalition for the working people, by the working people, and it's been really supported by our teachers, nurses, firefighters, and hotel workers, and so much more. And the question is Is this our moment? It is our moment as working people to make sure that we have a voice from San Francisco in Washington, D.C. This is our fight, and our fight to make sure that we will be heard. If we don't take this moment to make sure that we choose someone to represent us in the next moment, a lot of things that we're not happy about, what we see in San Francisco and how we're being represented in Sacramento, or that someone that actually doesn't know us and doesn't have a record to show for, we're gonna lose who we are in Washington, D.C. We're gonna lose a voice in Washington, D.C. And that this is a moment that we all have to ask ourselves, who will actually fight for us? I will fight for us.
That's right.
We will fight for us together. You know that when you send Connie Chan to Washington, D.C., you're not sending Connie Chan to Washington, D.C. You're sending us collectively as a coalition to Washington, D.C. Your voices have been heard and will continue to be heard in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, and Mr. Chakrabarty, please take 2 minutes to share your closing remarks.
Thanks for having us here. And yeah, you're right. These are unprecedented times. And you know what got us into these times? It's politics as usual. I've seen how career politicians go to DC. They sell their bids to the highest voter, or the highest bidder. They say yes to whatever leadership wants them to do just to climb up the ranks. And that's why nothing changes. The question is not, do we need experience? It's what kind of experience? Right now, we have a chance to completely turn things around, but that's going to require taking this popular outrage and turning that into political power. And I have experience doing that. We had a version of this back in 2018 where people were very mad that Trump had just gotten elected. And we turned that popular outrage into people-powered movements and got the squad elected. It's going to require experience changing what's politically possible in DC, and I've done that. We took the Democrats from wanting to do nothing on climate in 2019 to Joe Biden running on a bigger climate plan than Bernie Sanders did in 2016 and passing that, creating the largest investment in climate in history. We need experience of actually having the plans of what we're going to do when we get elected, and I've done that. At my think tank, New Consensus, we've developed a comprehensive, detailed plans of how exactly to build a clean economy that creates prosperity for all. And it's our version of a Project 2025, but in reverse. Now, the biggest thing we need in this moment to get any of this done is a movement bigger than we've seen, and that's happening right now. We are in a massive change moment. So we're on just one in New York. There are candidates running across the country who are stepping up to challenge this establishment, and I'm organizing with them to build a team of us who will go to DC, break the stranglehold of corporate money in our party, change Democratic Party leadership, and get to work building a society that works for all, because we can do that. But to do it, we're going to need all of us to be a part of it. Right now, there is a movement on the streets at these No Kings rallies, at these ICE protests. We have to turn that into political power, and we're seeing that movement in our campaign too. So I invite all of you to join us. Let's make this change happen.
Thank you very much. All right, you guys have been very restrained and very respectful. I really appreciate it, but now let's hear it for these three people who took the time for tonight's discussion. Shortcut Chakrabarty, San Francisco Supervisor Connie Chan, and State Senator Scott Wiener. Thanks again to our generous sponsors for tonight, AAMG Estrada Health and MG Stonework Company, and our community affiliates, American Community Media, Common Cause, Good Neighbor Lab, Indivisible, and San Francisco State Journalism Department. Thank you to the United Irish Cultural Center. We made this space available tonight. And to all the partners in the San Francisco Independent Media Coalition, you can find more about this organization serving the city at sfindependentmedia.org. On behalf of that group, I'm Ben Trefny. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ben.
係啦，咁啊，多謝大家咧，就係收睇咧，就係今次嘅現場直播嘅。咁啊，今日嘅直播咧，亦都差唔多啦。咁啊，亦都係關注翻咧，就係網友嘅評論先。係啦，咁啊，好多嘅朋友咧都係點讚啦、轉發咗呢一個直播嘅。係啦，潘生就話陳思敏啦就係香港嘅啦，成功推動啦就係三藩市一啲嘅立法啦。咁啊，今次嘅直播咧就分享到嚟呢度啦。咁啊，YouTube嘅朋友啦，咁啊現場直播咧亦都係關注到呢度。